spear died at the rate of 108 per day.
It is hard now to perceive in these miserable men as captives.
Jackson's scathing tongue labeled the accused mercilessly. Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop was the salesman of deception. Party philosopher Alfred Rosenberg, Nazism's intellectual high priest. Walter Funk, the banker of gold teeth. Hitler Youth leader Baldur von Schirach, the poisoner of youth. Fritz Sockel, cruelest slaver since the pharaohs. He might have gone on. Seyss Inquart, hangman of Holland. Frank, Jew butcher of Krakow. Streicher, merchant of hate. Frick, perverter of law. Bormann, Fritsch, von Neurath, Schacht, Dönitz, and Raeder, conspirators of international murder. It would be what England's Lord Burkitt would call a duel to the death between the representative of all that is worthwhile in civilization and the last surviving protagonist of all that is evil. With the bitter emotions of the Nuremberg trial about to break loose, a nervous occupation army built up security.
There were fears at a couple of occasions that there might be remnants of the SS that would organize and try to take the prison. At various points in the trial, tanks would be surrounding the courthouse. There would be riflemen on the rooftops because they didn't know what the attitude of the German people were going to be. And the interesting thing is that the attitude was one of almost total indifference. The German people at this point were shattered. Their cities lay in ruins. They were looking for a bar of soap, something to eat, a crust of bread. They couldn't have cared less what was going on in that courthouse in Nuremberg.
An American colonel, Burton Andrus, a humorless, Nazi-hating disciplinarian, took charge of the prisoners. He happily put the corpulent Goering on a strict diet that shrunk 80 pounds off his 5'6" frame. After the suicides by hanging of second-rank prisoners Robert Lee and Leonardo Conti, guards glared steadily into the lighted cells through watchports day and night. Chairs were not permitted within 4 feet of walls, and prisoners' hands had to be in view at all times. Talking to guards and any exchange of military courtesies were prohibited. Some prisoners reported Andrus appearing in their nightmares. There were 4 prosecution teams at Nuremberg, reflecting the 4 major powers running the trials. Heading the prosecution along with Robert Jackson were a crack British team led by Sir Hartley Shawcross, British Attorney General, and his deputy, Sir David Maxwell Fyfe. France sent Champetier de Ribe, former French Undersecretary of State, and Russia Lieutenant General Roman Rudenko, Chief Prosecutor of the Ukrainian Republic.
Justice Jackson was not only the leader of the American prosecution staff, he was really the inspiration for this entire trial.
The privilege of opening the first trial in history for crimes against the peace of the world imposes a grave responsibility. The wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish have been so calculated, so malignant and so devastating that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored because it cannot survive their being repeated.
Jackson had worried about a dearth of evidence. He hadn't counted on the German character. Evidence arrived in mountains.
One of the things that we associate with the German character is an orderliness, a fastidiousness about record keeping, particularly. The thump of the rubber stamp on a document is a very Teutonic sound. During the course of the Nazi regime, this quality of character persisted. Virtually everything that these people did was documented.
47 crates of binders, 3,000 pounds of Nazi Party records, tons of diplomatic papers, 12 volumes of secret foreign policy conference records, and miles of film poured in. Jackson decided to switch his prosecution away from witnesses.
As things went along and we uncovered all these interesting documents which were so incriminating of the defendants, Justice Jackson made the statement that perhaps it could be mainly a documentation trial.
Dead set against this was the colorful General William Donovan. He was head of the Cloak and Dagger OSS and a hugely decorated hero of 2 wars who had gathered much of the evidence.
General Donovan felt the trial would not have a real impact unless there were live witnesses on the stand being interrogated, telling it like it was. He thought that was the way to capture public attention.
Jackson would have his way, and the violently opposed Donovan would quit the trial, taking much-needed talent and expertise with him. Germans were free to choose any lawyer they wanted, and they did, including unregenerate Nazis who might have belonged in the dock themselves.
The defendants had, in effect, a gilt-edged defense. Any poor defendant in an American court today would be lucky to have the quality of defense, because some of these people were top lawyers in Germany. Some of them went on to fabulous careers in the years following the war.
The primary defense of the German lawyers at Nuremberg on the question of aggressive war was that the charge was ex post facto. They argued that never before had any head of state been called upon to answer the crime of waging aggressive war, and that there was no juridical basis for this charge.
Sir Hartley Shawcross replied, "I suppose the first person ever charged with murder might have said, 'Now see here, you can't do that. Murder hasn't been made a crime yet.' The tribunal said, 'The very idea that states commit crimes is a fiction. Crimes are always committed by persons. Men who exercised great power cannot be allowed to shift their responsibility on the fictional state which cannot be produced for trial.'"
Nein! Ich kenne mich keinesfalls schuldig.
Now the accused filled the court with their firm cries.
Ich bekenne mich nicht schuldig.
Not guilty. Hermann Goering was the leader of a group of defiant defendants.
At Nuremberg, his philosophy was, these people are not going to exonerate us. This is victor's vengeance. They won, so we're in the dock, and we can go belly crawling, which I'm not about to do, or we can hold our standard high and we can go down with the swastika flying. He took that attitude, and his carryover influence from his position in the Third Reich was still effective over many of these defendants. He was able to dominate them, to frighten them, to intimidate them, and had a good deal of leadership throughout the trial.
There was a problem big enough to swamp the trial. How to make the words of the court and defendants comprehensible to one another and to the world.
An American judge and an English judge speaking, of course, English, a Soviet judge speaking Russian, and a French judge speaking French. 3 languages there. The defendants were German. They had to be questioned in German, in their own tongue. So IBM had an idea. IBM suggested some equipment that they were working on which would provide something that we take completely for granted today, instantaneous translation. And one of the most successful recruiting grounds for interpreters were international telephone exchanges. These people were used to working very quickly with language and had very practical knowledge.
The most difficult and noble task of the prosecution was not to center the case upon the most lurid of the German atrocities and go for the patient, brilliant assembly of an airtight case built on the conspiracy. The greater goal was to convict the whole machinery of aggressive war on behalf of the humanity it had ravaged.
In January 5, 1937, in a secret meeting with his top political and military leaders,